Vav Purim, 1986. The Rebbe is going to speak about a very interesting halacha that that this halacha concerning the reading of the Megillah is encapsulates the idea of the miracle that Purim took place. And the question is the connection between. It says in halacha that when a person reads the pasuk, the Balylah reads in the Megillah, he reads Balylah hu nadad ashnas hamelech, when it starts telling the story about how during the nighttime Friedrich couldn't sleep, and he called for his servants to bring him the book of recollections, Divrei Yomim, etc., and they found that Mordechai was never repaid for saving the king's life. That's a part of the Megillah that a person needs to raise his voice, because that is the beginning of the miracle, and even more so, it's the most powerful part of the miracle. In other words, the core of the miracle is with that event. And the Rebbe is going to question, of all the events that took place in Megillah Esther, why do you focus on that thing? The king woke up at night, and that's the core miracle. That's the main part of the miracle. That seemingly there are other events that express it. So and the Maamar is going to explain how really in the Chassidus what Balylah hu nadad ashnas hamelech represents. It's talking about the Melech being Malchei Shel Olam, the king of the world. So then, from this, we'll understand how from that evolved the miracle down here, and why Balylah hu nadad ashnas hamelech is so important. To be able to explain that, he's going to go into explaining what the idea of sleep means. What's the concept of sleep? What's the spiritual idea of sleep? And how that has to do with a time of Golus, and the counter of it, the awakening from sleep, not being able to sleep, is the beginning of the concept of miracles and redemption and salvation for the Yid. Okay, let's start inside. At that night, the sleep of the king escaped him. And he said, you could bring the book of remembrances, the book that tells history and events that occurred. Maybe and my father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, brings about this in the Maamar by the same title of the year 1940. The Rebbe says that in 1940, when the Frierdiker Rebbe said this Maamar, it was also a leap year, like the year when the Rebbe said the Maamar in Tafshin Mem Vav. This was the first year, within the first year of the Frierdiker Rebbe's arrival to the shores of America, being the second time that he came, because he visited America in 1929. But in 1940 was the second time, and in that first year of being here, he said this Maamar. In that second time that he came to America, he spent his final 10 years of his life in this world, he spent in America. So the Frierdiker Rebbe brings in his Maamar the Isa b'minhagi Maril. It's brought down the customs of the Maril. The Maril is one who, many of our customs that we follow, are the original source where it comes from is the person by the name of Maril. He was one of the very big Hamid Rachamim of Ashkenaz in the Middle Ages, or the middle of the 1500s or so, maybe a little bit earlier. Balylah hu, that when we reach in the Megillah to the pasuk that says at that night, the Balylah has to raise his voice when he is reading it. If you pay attention this year by reading the Megillah, you will hear this, that the Balylah raises his voice when he comes to Balylah. How come? Because that is the main miracle. The Gemara calls it the might, power of the miracle. So the Rebbe asks, and he brings the question of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe analyzes this. The Tzarech Lahav need to understand why do we say this idea that the king's sleep escaped him and he was awake? That's the core of the miracle. That's the principal miracle. Seemingly the main miracle, the power of the miracle and the cause of the miracle, Esther is the request of Esther to the king and her beseeching him when she told Achashverosh that I and my nation were sold to Haman to destroy him. That took place after that. Or the events that took place when she first had to appear to the king, which actually happened earlier in the Megillah than the story about, not necessarily earlier. It says, Esther, also concerning the fast that Esther requested from Mordechai, that before she presents herself to the king, since the king hadn't called her in 30 days, it was very dangerous to approach the king without an invitation. So she asked that the Mordechai and the Yidden should fast for her, like it says, fast on my behalf. Like it says in the end of the Megillah, that they wrote down and they recorded in the Megillah, the matters of the fast, and they're crying out to Hashem. So seemingly there were more core things and more important things and more valuable things that had to do with the miracle itself. Why specifically do we have to raise the voice of the reading of the Megillah when it says that that night the king's sleep escaped? The Maamar continues. The idea behind this is the Frierdiker Rebbe goes on to explain. It's brought down in this medrash called Yalkut Shemoini. It says Balylah who not Doshnas HaMelech. At that night, the sleep of the king escaped him. It's referring to the king of the world's sleep escaped him. Melech Malcham Lochim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the king of kings Hashem. And he asked, is then an idea of sleep by Hashem? So what does it mean that the sleep of the King of Kings, the sleep of Hashem, escaped him? Rather, when the Yidden sin, Hashem makes himself as if he's asleep. Like the Navi says, or Tehillim it says, why do you sleep, Hashem? Meaning, why do you act towards us in a way as if you're asleep? That is when Yidden don't do what they're supposed to do. When they do fulfill his will, so then it says he will not slumber, he will not sleep, the guardian of Israel. And the Frierdiker Rebbe analyzes, he questions the Yalkut Shemoini's explanation that what is the significance, what's the idea of sleep when we're talking about Hashem? Second paragraph. Be able to understand what sleep means above and the idea of sleep escaping him. And also, and also what's the connection between the sleep of Hashem escaped him with the power of the miracle down here below in the physical kingdom of Persia? It's known, Torah spoke in the language of man, uses human expressions. Sem moving from this understood. The idea of sleep above is similar to the idea of sleep when we use in human terms the idea of sleep. That's what the Frierdiker brings in the continuation of his Maamar. The idea of sleep above, that's the way it is, identical or corresponding to by how it is by a person down here below. So now he's going to analyze spiritually, soul-wise, what occurs when a person sleeps. So first he contrasts with the way a person's awake. The B'shosh Adam when a person's awake, in Nikol HaKoiches and Bizgalus, all the powers of the soul are revealed. Upoilim Pulasam, and they affect what they have to affect. The intellect is functioning, the emotions are functioning, his thoughts, speech, his deed, his eyes, he's seeing things, he's hearing things, all of his powers, he's speaking, all of his powers and faculties are fully functioning. During sleep, so then the powers leave and become concealed. His intellect is not functioning, his emotions, his hearing, his seeing, his speech, thought, all these things are gone. This leaving of all these soul powers is not that it's completely gone. Rather, the way it's functioning is different soul powers is different than the way it is when he's awake. So let's say the thoughts that's flying around in his mind is disorganized, like he's soon going to explain. Just even though during sleep the powers, the soul powers are found by a person identical to the way it is when he's awake. Still know it's possible that when he's asleep, they will not affect what they need to affect. They will not influence him. They will not function the way they're supposed to function. He has intellect, he has thought, but it doesn't function like a conscious person uses his thought and intellect and so on. And even if his thought, let's say, is working, after some it could be that the way they're working is totally disorganized. And not only is it disorganized, it's possible that the way they are working is in an opposite order than it should be. That higher and more important powers will be completely concealed. And other powers and other matters will be much more powerful, totally incomparable to their nature. Let's say, for example, normally a person's intellect is higher and his emotions are lower. But when he's asleep, his intellect is not really functioning that much, but he can be all excited in his emotions completely without the being reined in by his intellect. So we see there's a big mishmash when the person's asleep when it comes to his inner emotions. To such a degree that in a dream, you could see two opposites, which is completely nonsensical because his normal capabilities of differentiation and being able to consciously set everything up in its correct place is gone. And therefore, because it's gone and concealed, therefore, there's able to be this whole mishmash when he's asleep. So the Rebbe goes on to say, top of the next page, from this is affected another difference between a person that's awake to a person that's asleep. Like it's explained over there in the Maamar, the Friedrich Rebbe. When a person's awake, then it's recognizable the advantage and the quality of certain powers over other powers. You could recognize the benefit of intellect over emotions. You could recognize the benefit of thought over speech, for example. But during sleep, it's not recognizable the advantage of different powers, one over the other. Because during sleep, the effect and the influence of the soul powers is, like we said before, disorganized. And because it's disorganized, you cannot tell what's more important and what we should focus on and what's less important. Not only that, there are such powers that it totally do not express themselves in a revealed way. It's possible it's possible that the higher powers, like we said, intellect, well, something we won't even see at all. Any intellectual processes when he's asleep, or will not be recognizable, their importance and their quality. And it's obvious, it's not felt their individual quality over in the other over other powers. What's so special about intellect? Why is it better than, let's say, the emotions and so on? Or what's so special about kindness, better than severity? All these things are not expressed and felt. And, and the details that the Rebbe is going into over here is important to be able to understand the allegory and the metaphor, how he's going to apply it to the sleep of Hashem in regards to Hashem's function in this world, as we will soon see. But let's still keep on exploring the metaphor. The reason why it's not recognizable the value of certain soul powers over others when a person's asleep, because during sleep, the power of differentiation that's in the human intellect is not something that's revealed. Because there's no differentiation and there's no appreciation, so then everything is out of order. When you appreciate different things and you delineate, you say this is this and this is that, you say, oh, this is more valuable, this is less valuable. When a person's awake, by his power of intellect, he differentiates and separates between one matter and another matter. He organizes everything in its particular place that belongs to it. You can skip the parentheses. Therefore, the effect of all the powers is in an organized fashion, because you realize this has more value, this has less value. It's obvious that when a person's awake, it's not applicable to have a joining of opposites. Therefore, then it's recognized the advantage and the quality of every soul power, its unique thing that it brings to the table. But during sleep, when it becomes concealed, the power of distinction and separation, in addition to the fact that many powers can be concealed, additional to this, there becomes also the confusion and intermingling of the powers, that things get totally mixed up. And now he's going to explain the allegory, how this applies in Hashem's relationship to the world. When we're speaking about Hashem, Kaviyachol, metaphorically speaking, that he's asleep. In the metaphor and the example of this was understood above. The idea of sleep above is that there's a lack of light. In other words, lack of revelation. Like we said, the person is not, his soul powers aren't revealed. So Kaviyachol, when we say Hashem is asleep, that means he withholds the revelation of his light. Drawing down of the divine light in the whole chain order of descent of the world, from above the highest level till this low world, that there's nothing lower than it. Is in an organized manner. It goes step by step. This is higher than that. That is higher than that further thing. There's differentiations in the levels. What's more important? What's more higher? What's more valuable? Till there's the difference in the importance from one extreme to another extreme. When you're dealing from the beginning of Seder Shtalshus to the end, there's great extremes, and there's a clear delineation and distinction between them. That is when Kaviyachol Hashem is acting awake. But if he acts asleep, the idea of sleep above is the like we said before, one of the matters of sleep is that the powers become concealed. The same thing, Kaviyachal by Hashem's sleep, that many powers of godliness their effect is concealed. Also, it's possible that even those powers of godliness that do affect and are still functioning, but their order becomes completely mixed up and turned around. After she is say that Hofkitel, it's possible to be an opposite order. And that opposite order impacts Yidden. The normal order of things is there's a value system. The world was created for the Yidden and for the Torah. I'm giving you a little bit of heads up what he's about to say. Since the world was created for the Yidden and for the Torah, therefore, the value system would say that first and foremost, what has to be the utmost functioning, what has to be the utmost in value in the world, what has to be the most successful in the world, Yidden and the ability to do Torah mitzvahs, etc., etc. Yet, we see it's not that way. That's a result of sleep. Let's see it inside. Hine, Klal say that was the general chain order of descent. Nivr b'shvil Yisrael, b'shvil Torah was created for the sake of Yidden and for the sake of Torah. Kemaimer, like it says, Bereshis, right away at the beginning of Chumash Bereshis, the Chazal say, what's the meaning of the word Bereshis? Bereshis needs to be divided into two words, Beis and Reshis. There are two things that are Reshis. B'shvil Yisrael shenikru Reshis, for the sake of the Yidden that are called Reshis, or b'shvil Torah shenikras Reshis, and for the sake of Torah, which is called Reshis. Meaning, the entire world, both our physical universe and everything in the spiritual realms that preceded it, all was set into place and all was created for Yidden and the Torah. So when Hashem is Kaviyachal awake, so then everything runs perfectly, and you could see that, and it's obvious in the creation that Yidden and Torah are the center of everything. When everything is in an organized fashion, movement, it's understood. Since the entire chain order of descent, the whole systems that were put into place were for the sake of the Torah and the Yidden. Therefore, yes, the Yisrael calling Yom say the Rishtal. Yidden have all matters of the chain order of descent of all the worlds. Yidden have all the matters of all the worlds that are measured and limited. And they have all matters that are beyond measure and boundary. Both things that are internalized and both things that are transcendent. And which means, obviously, as well, that in this world as well, they are also successful and they are able to grow spiritually and they have no physical issues that stand in their way. Everything is functioning perfectly. Everything is running the way it's supposed to be. That is when there's the idea of Hashem being awake. When there's the idea of sleep, when Hashem acts as if he's asleep, the manner that the chain order descent is in a disorganized fashion, like we explained before. That when a person's asleep, his soul powers are completely out of order, and we don't see how one is more important than the other, and we don't know what is the main function of a person. Simply put, when you look at a sleeping person, you don't see how the sleeping person is different than an animal. This is breathing, this is breathing. This is like fluttering its eyelids, this is fluttering its eyelids. You don't see any difference. You don't see the quality and the benefit of one over the other. In us, when there's the idea of sleep above, even though at its core and at its purpose, everything was created for the sake of Yidden, it's possible that there should be decrees against the Jewish people, heaven forbid. Like the literal and simple idea of sleep, that normal, regular sleep, physical sleep causes, that elevated matters of a person should be concealed legamri, totally, like the intellect and so on. The koiches achenim, you b'toikim gadol, and other powers will be very powerful, be yoiser, even more so, shaloy lefiarkum klal, completely incomparable, etc. Like we said before, he could be wrapped up in his emotions of his dreams and so on, much more powerfully than he would be if he would be awake and being able to use his intellect to exercise control over all these emotions and fears that might go through his sleep. So now we can understand what the Yalkut Shimoini says. Say you much possibly Yalkut. But this will be understood what it says over there in the Yalkut Shimoini. Yisrael chaytim oitzas mikiyoshan, when Yidden Yoshen, when a Yidden sin, so Hashem makes himself as if he's asleep. When they do his will, when the Yidden fulfill Hashem's will, they do Torah mitzvah, so he will not sleep and not slumber. Hinin is Balylah, it's explained previously. The entire chain order of descent of all the spiritual realms were created for the Yidden, that they are called the Reishis, and also Bishvil Torah Nikras Reishis, and also was created for the sake of Torah that's called Reishis. So when these two things join together, so then everything functions. It's like Yiddish, they say seklap, everything like hits the right notes. Therefore, when these two matters of Torah and the Yidden are perfect and complete, that Yidden and Torah are bound up with each other until the Yidden and Torah become like one thing. They're inseparable. So then the entire chain order of descent of all the spiritual world that were created for the sake of the Torah and for the sake of Yidden, so then it's all in an organized fashion. The higher and more important things are given more value. The lower, the less important things, less value. Then it's recognizable the special quality of the Yidden in this world. That Yidden are called my son, my firstborn, meaning, as one of the explanations in the word B'choir means that he's valuable and special and held to great heights. The fact that everything was created for the sake of the Yidden, that is recognizable in creation. In creation, one could actually tell this. Just like an awakened person, you could see the advantage of intellect over emotions, thought over speech, etc. But when there's a lacking in the bond between Yidden and Torah, and like the expression of the Medrash, when Yidden sin, Yidden sinning is their sleep. They are spiritually asleep. Maamar, like the Chazal say an expression, they explain, Ani Yeshena, the Zohar says, I am asleep. It's a pasuk in Shiur Shirim. Where is this? This is Bigolusa, when Yidden are in Golus, meaning they're in a state of doing not what they're supposed to do, so the Yidden are called asleep. So when Yidden are asleep, they don't value what's important. They are acting in a sleeping manner. They don't give value and importance to things that are truly important. There's a poil gamba seder ishtalshlus mida connected mida, so that this affects the entire chain order of descent of the spiritual world, as we know the idea of measure for measure. Inyan hashena, there should be the idea of sleep, the heder aseder, and lack of order of bilbul beseder ishtalshlus, and they cause an entire mix-up in the chain order of descent of all the world. They're making that the king of the world is in a state of sleep. The king of kings, Hashem, is now asleep. So this is what happens when Yidden are asleep. And that's why there could be that Yidden can find themselves in a state of deprivation, a state of persecution, and so on. Now we can understand, this will answer the question at the beginning of the Maamar. What was so special that King Achashverosh couldn't sleep, that because of that, we call that the beginning and the core part of the miracle, when you have to raise your voice, the one who reads the Megillah has to raise his voice then. How is that the case. Why is that the case? Because the main thing is we're talking about Hashem's sleep. Stop. And once Hashem's sleep stops, then down here, Yidden were able to be in an ascendant state as well. Then Yubam, with this will be understood. This is understood why the primary miracle is that the sleep of the king, meaning the king of the world, escaped him. The lifnei prior to this, during the decree, there was the sleep of the king of the world, meaning that was not recognizable, the quality of the Yidden over the other nations, and therefore was possible for bigger nations to persecute the smaller nation, which is Israel. But after this took place, they avoided Israel through the Yidden doing their service, meaning they fulfilled the will of their maker, like the Yalkut Shemaini said. It was the primary part of the miracle, and the power of the miracle that the sleep of the king Hashem escaped it. Like it says, awake, why do you sleep, Hashem? And he awoke because Hashem was asleep. That this caused that instead of previously the quality of the Yidden being concealed, just like in the sleep, the more important soul powers are concealed. Instead, when he's awake, the important part of the world, the Jewish people, was revealed their quality and their importance. Yeah, when it came to the opponents of the Jewish people, they became that we will surely fall before him, like Zeresh told Haman. Mordechai Yehudi concerning Mordechai the Jew, it came about that the king desired his honor to such a degree, like he concludes in the Megillah, that the Jewish people had light, joy, happiness, and glory and honor. That these four descriptions, Oida, light, Simcha, joy, Sos and happiness, and Yikar, glory and honor, are things that correspond to four levels of Seder Ishtalshlut. Skip the parentheses that he also says over there that he also correspond to four letters of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. I know this means Shnikar B'Yisrael. It's recognizable in the Yidden Shekol Seder Ishtalshlut Niver B'Shvilom, that the entire chain of the order of descent was created for them. That's what it means. La Yehudim Haisa. For the Yidden it was Oida V'Simcha V'Sasum Vikar. They had in them. It was revealed in them. It was open in them. The entire Seder Ishtalshlut, everyone could see that. And not only was it recognizable, the power of the Yidden, not only that, also that became transformed, it was turned over, instead of the enemies being in ascendant state, the Yidden overpowered their enemies, and they ruled over their enemies to such a degree, until many of the people of the nations over there, they became Jewish. And the Toisval name gave him that literally more non-Jews became Jewish. The ultimate level of transformation of darkness to light and bitter to sweet, this all took place because Hashem's awakening from his sleep, and therefore the Yidden's great quality was recognizable, and therefore in the world, even the nations of the world recognized it, and they wanted to join, and they joined the Jewish people. So now the Rebbe is going to ask a very interesting question. If we're saying that the problem was when the bond between the Yidden and the Torah becomes severed, so therefore there is a corresponding level of above, that there is this level of sleep where it's not recognizable the great quality of the Jewish people. And then when the Yidden demonstrated that they are devoted to the Torah, so then Hashem like awakens from his sleep, metaphorically speaking, and therefore the great quality of the Yidden becomes revealed. So why do we call this a miracle? We're saying that by Balylah who nada the shnas hamelech, it was a level of that the king's sleep escaped him was the ikra shel nas, the takva shel nas. It was the main miracle. Seemingly, it's not miraculous. It's something that's a normal extension of it. When the Yidden are not doing what they're supposed to do, so then you don't recognize in Hashem Kaviyachol is asleep. And when the Yidden are doing what they're supposed to do, so then the quality of the Yidden becomes recognizable because Hashem Kaviyachol awakens. Why we call it a miracle then? This is the question of the Rebbe that he adds to what the summary that he gave from the Friedrichs. Yet we still have to understand according to this explanation that we just now said. What the fact that the sleep of the king of the world escaped him, it's an automatic result. It's a consequence that happens by itself automatically from the fact that the Yidden were not doing the will of the Eibishter. I'm sorry. Excuse me. The fact that the king's sleep escaped him is an automatic result and consequence of the Yidden now doing the will of their maker. And it wasn't just Stam doing the will, but they were doing it above and beyond the Befrat, especially Shabbidos, we know that their avoida was in a total self-sacrifice. Maamar, that like brought down the continuation of the Friedrich Rebbe's Maamar from 1940. The reason why the sleep of the king of the world escaped him is Mesiras Nefesh, through the self-sacrifice that they stood the entire year with self-sacrifice. In actuality, that they were from Pesach time or before Pesach till the next other, or actually from when the letters went out. I'm not going to get into the exact date line, but it was about an entire year that the Yidden were under a threat of annihilation, and still in all, they didn't assimilate, and they didn't leave Yiddishkeit. They stood fast with their Yiddishkeit. So they stood an entire year with self-sacrifice. So they didn't just observe Torah mitzvahs. They were literally willing to give up their lives for proclaiming that they are Jews and for remaining part of the Jewish people. So it seems to be a normal outcome. It's not miraculous, like the Sun explained. The Rebbe goes on to explain what is so special about an entire year of self-sacrifice, especially according to what's explained in a different place. The exact point over here that they were the fact that the avoid of self-sacrifice was for an entire year. A year indicates all types of changes. The shana hulashon shinu. The Hebrew word shana is related to the Hebrew word shinu, which means change. In other words, the whole entire year encompasses different changes. Because a year includes in it all the changes of the weather, except if you live in Los Angeles or maybe in Florida. But usually in normal places in the world, there's all different types of spring, summer, winter, fall, etc. You have all these different changes. So the fact that they were living through all different types of changes, but the changes did not affect their steadfast nature. There was no change in their willingness to sacrifice themselves to remain Jews. It's a moira, this is an indication that is true self-sacrifice, that no change can move it. So therefore, the Rebbe asked the question that I mentioned before, according to this, it needs further explanation. Why do we need a miracle, especially the might of the miracle, so that the king's sleep, Hashem's sleep, should escape him? This is seemingly a natural outcome that comes automatically. It's a normal consequence. Mida connected, mida measure for measure. Since the idea of the cause for sleep stopped above, because the cause for sleep was the things that they didn't do right, and now that they were totally committed, so Hashem would automatically awake. Automatically, the consequence would stop, the result would stop. And the king's sleep would now escape him. And all the matters of the miracle of Purim would occur following that. Rebbe answers this question via Shleimer Abir, but we say the explanation of this is before it's explained in a different place. Amaila the Nes Purim, the advantage of the miracle of Purim, Nes Hamalubish B'Tevada. It was a miracle that was specifically enclosed in nature. I know this means. Shebitol Hagzeira V'Geula Hayaba'oifen Melubish B'Teva B'Pashtus. How was the decree nullified? How was the redemption taking place? It was completely natural. There was no supernatural event. Haman didn't all of a sudden jump out of a window. Everything was just normal. Haman made his decree. Mordechai asked Esther to go speak to Achashverosh. Esther spoke to Achashverosh. She made him a party. Achashverosh wanted to please Esther. He heard about Haman. He killed Haman. He made Mordechai popular. Fine. Everything completely natural. And it's so natural that we didn't even miraculously leave exile. We were still the servants and slaves of Achashverosh. They didn't leave exile. Achashverosh didn't drop dead. Achashverosh didn't send all the Jews of Persia out to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash in Eretz Yisrael. Nothing. So everything was completely normal. Based on this, that the miracle was enclosed in nature, the Rebbe says we can explain why it's considered a miracle. According to this, we can explain the content and the meaning of the miracle of Purim. The source of the Hamshachah that from it is affected, the idea that the king's sleep escaped him, is a very high source where it comes from. Before Bekam is like explained in many places that the reason why Hashem's name is not mentioned in the Megillah, but not the other names of Hashem. It's only hinted, but Rashi Tevis, Soipi Tevis, there's certain Rashi Tevis in the Megillah, acronyms, and certain ends of letters that hint at Hashem's name. Why was Hashem's name not mentioned in the Megillah? There's different reasons, but according to Chassidus, why was it not mentioned? Because Mishum Sha'or HaMislabish B'Megillah, the light of godliness that's enclosed in the Megillah, Hulamaylam Ebchinas Shemus, is higher even than the names. We know the Rebbe always explains about Moida Ani. That Moida Ani, we don't say Hashem's name, because if we are addressing Hashem and we're thanking Hashem, we're reaching Hashem's essence that's beyond any type of name and beyond any type of revelations. A name is something that I use to connect to someone else. This is an aspect of Hashem that became revealed in from a place that's completely beyond and above everything. Okay, before Maamar, now I'd like to explain those at the conclusion of the Friedrich Rebbe's Maamar. Through the self-sacrifice of the Eden throughout the entire year, as we mentioned before, they reached Hashem's very essence, to draw down a revelation of the light of the essence, until the revelation of the miracle of Purim was from the 50th gate of Bina Shalamaylam Miseder Ishtalshus, that's beyond the chain order of descent. In other words, if the revelation would have been from Seder Ishtalshus, so then you could say it makes sense. Beforehand, they weren't deserving of the revelation of Seder Ishtalshus. Now that the Eden did what they were supposed to do, they got Seder Ishtalshus. Here, we're talking about a revelation that's completely beyond our reach. That was the miracle. And the 50th gate is actually hinted in the fact that Haman wanted to make he made a gallows that was tall 50 amas, which what's the logic of having a gallows that's tall 50 amas? But it's indicative, according to Chassidus, to the 50th gate of Bina. The 50th gate of Bina has to do with the deepest, most levels of godliness. That's beyond Seder Ishtalshus. That's al derech on the Siva Lamed Beis. There's also called that in Chachma, there's 32 paths. And the 32nd path is similar to the 50th gate of Bina, also completely above and beyond the Lamed Beis and Siva Chachma. Of the 32 paths of Chachma, Shu Nesiv Lo Yodei Ayit, it's the level of this path that's unknown completely. It's beyond knowledge, even though Chachma is about wisdom and knowledge, it's about beyond revelation. Yes, if we could add the Gambachin is Nesiv Lo Yodei Ayit Shaykh Lagil de Purim. Also, this path that's unknown is connected to the revelation of Purim, just like the 50th gate was connected with Purim, like we said before, that Haman was prepared a gallows 50 amas high. The same thing, this unknown path of Chachma, the 32nd path, is also connected with the revelation of Purim. Concerning Purim, the Chazal said, that we make close one redemption to another redemption. The simple meaning is that we have the Purim in the second Adar because we want it to be close to the redemption of Purim, to be close to the redemption that follows Adar in Nisan, the redemption of Pesach. But the Rebbe says that this indicates another type of redemption, which is Baramis Gama Lagula Asidam, that when the Chazal say that Purim is made close to another redemption, this hints also at being close to the redemption of the future redemption. Agula mitzvah shlema de Mashiach tzedkeinu, the true and complete redemption through Mashiach. Bari Mashiach tzedkeinu b'chinas yechida. We know Mashiach is the level of yechida, the highest level of the soul. Shekosher b'chinas shar anun v'nesiv alamed beis nesiv l'yodei ayit. That's connected with the 50th gate. That's connected with the 32nd path. That's unknown. Mevor b'machmacha baruch, like it's explained in a different place at length. That's why it's called the miracle of Purim. He adds some Indian zed, this very matter, to draw down such a high revelation from Hashem's very essence, the 32nd pathway, the 50th gate, something that's completely beyond Seder Ishtalshus. From the Nas HaMelubish B'Teva, it should be in a manner of a miracle that's enclosed specifically in nature. That is itself is the greatest miracle, the Takvishal and the power of the miracle. Let's skip to the parentheses, to the end bracha.
1 second, before you go to the end bracha, what showed us that they reached the 50th gate, that they reached such a high level? How did we see that?
Gallows that they hung Haman on. And
the gallows.
That was the 50th.
The gallows show that they reached such a high level that's even higher, like the 50th gate. Okay, thank you.
It should be the will of Hashem. That this should actually become revealed in the simple sense that doesn't miss and go out of its simple meaning. The literal meaning, that one redemption should be brought close to the other redemption. In other words, Purim should bring us to the final redemption, Megulas Purim, Alagula Mitzvah Shlema, from the redemption of Purim to the true and complete redemption. The Mashiach came from Mashiach. Va'aru Manan Ishmaya, we should fly with them, with these clouds of heaven, Maamar, speedily in our days, Maamar.
Wow, thank you.